Welcome to Cube FM. First of all, who are you? What's your role, and where do you work?
Hi, great to be here. First of all, my name is Eyal Bookchin. I am the CTO and co-founder at a company called Metal Bear, where we build MirrorD, an open source project or open core that lets you run the local process in the context of your Kubernetes cluster and cut down your feedback loop.
Now, what are three emerging Kubernetes tools that you are keeping an eye on?
One interesting tool is called Glasscube, with a K, of course. They chose a really interesting problem to tackle, which is the problem of providing on-prem software for clients. So it's a really great management platform for that sort of thing. So that's one I'm keeping an eye on. They're great people as well. Another one is Robusta, which is a tool for incident response. This is something that was very painful to me at my previous work, where we had a high-scale production system, very hard to support, a lot of people involved, and that's really the sort of thing that would have helped us a whole lot. And then another one that's not really, pure Kubernetes, but local stack. So at MirrorD, we're very staunch proponents of local development, and local stack is a big player in the area, and they're doing really interesting things that are moving forward really fast and are really interesting to keep track of.
Now, on the subject of tooling and platform engineering, our guest Angel stressed that standardizing everything makes cluster management easier. What's your advice for building platforms that can be used by several teams in an organization?
I think the one thing that as engineers we tend to overlook or sort of think is that if we build a really good product, then people are going to use it. But from our experience implementing and deploying MirrorD at various large organizations, I mean, that's like building the product is just the first step, right? There's a very intricate and long process that has to follow. You have to hold a lot of hands. You have to track adoption. You have to constantly see or detect blockers. You have to be very passionate about gathering feedback. But it's also difficult because you don't want to be forcing people to use it. So there's like a delicate balance there. But I guess to sum it up, don't think that your work is over when you've built a good product, even if it applies to everyone and can theoretically be used by everyone, but don't ignore the adoption process.
On the subject of using boring yet simple tools, our guest Luca built a container runtime in C in his spare time. He shared that during his career, he moved on from using the latest tech to focusing more on working with a more limited set of tools, but becoming a real expert. What's your advice regarding adopting new technologies in your personal life and work, perhaps in a Kubernetes cluster?
I think it's a really interesting question at this time, right? With AI and the level of abstraction that tooling provides has sort of jumped a few levels, and I think that the answer sort of lies there, right? I mean, you can't really avoid abstraction as engineers. We have a job to do. It doesn't really matter how we do it. The means justify the end. And it's not that simple, right? Because especially when you think about junior engineers, there's the question of when do you actually learn the basics, what's going on behind the scenes, the fundamentals, because they'll inevitably affect the quality of your decisions later on. But I think there's really no escaping abstraction and advanced tooling, and the best way forward for me personally, at least, is to just find the best tool for the job, no matter how it does it.
If we're going to be talking about platform engineering and people, our guest Ori shared that rushing into solutions without understanding the root cause can lead to fixing symptoms instead of the actual problem. He mentioned the case of network policies and how sometimes the root cause of a problem is a people problem, and the solution lies in addressing that. What is your experience with providing tooling and platforms on Kubernetes to other engineers? What are some of the soft challenges that you faced?
Yes, I think I touched upon it a little bit in the first question. I mean, in the end, we're all engineers and non-engineers resistant to change, right? And it takes on a particular flavor with engineers. In my experience, there's a lot of skepticism around new tooling. There are a lot of very entrenched habits that are hard to break. There is a sort of tendency to try and build stuff yourself, or trust more in things that if you don't build yourself, at least very well how they work under the hood. And so I think and these are all challenges we faced at Murity, I guess just to summarize, you have to know and understand these specific challenges and these specific resistances in order to disarm them, right? So yeah,
Kubernetes turned 10 years old last year. What do you think is going to happen in the next 10 years?
I can just say AI, right? But if we, I mean, even before that, right? Like I think the trend in the last few years, in terms of tooling at least, which is my area, is that the development stage was relatively neglected compared to operations, deployment, etc., monitoring, observability. There's an interesting movement of catching up now, I think, and part of it is AI, right? Because especially around coding, which is not Kubernetes related, but that's obviously undergoing a sea change. But in the end, and this is especially painful for Kubernetes deployment, you have to have a way to run your code, test your code in a way that reflects production. And there are a lot of interesting startups in this area at the moment, and I think this is going to undergo a really interesting change in the next couple of years.
What's next for you?
We're working hard on Murity. We just last year we released what we're calling Murity for Teams, which is a paid version of Murity and makes it more suitable for enterprises, and that is our main focus at the moment. So that's seeing really great traction. We're growing the team, and so Murity is, in a word, is going to be my focus for the next couple of years.
How can people get in touch with you?
Various ways. I'm available. I'm on Twitter, on our Discord, if you're on there with me or the team, and of course by email.